Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 10. Now, as Jesus and his disciples went on their way, he entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks, and so she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken from her." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, which, just so you know, Luke has clearly said means that above all he is on his way to a cross, when he stops at Bethany, a village just a couple of miles east of Jerusalem, to see two of his dearest friends, Mary and her sister Martha, and presumably their brother Lazarus as well, although Luke doesn't mention him because this story isn't about him. It's about his sisters who had heard that Jesus was coming, and so Martha had sent word that they'd like him to come join them for dinner. When he arrives and knocks on the door, footsteps scamper inside of the house, Martha's footsteps. She had been dusting and had just paused to refold one of the napkins and wipe a water spot off of one of the soup spoons. At the sound of the knock, she sets the spoon in place, dashes into the kitchen to give the sauce for the dessert a quick stir, and then scurries to the door, tossing her dust cloth into a bin in the hall closet on the way and shutting the door with her other hand so it's out of sight. There's a mirror by the front door. It's not crooked, but she straightens it. Then she moves the throw rug in front of the door just a half inch to the right, and then just a quarter inch back to the left, before catching her breath and opening the door. And there is Jesus, the sight of whom every single time takes a bit of her breath away. It's his eyes, she's decided. Martha shows him to one of the wing-back chairs to the left of the bay window, double-checking as she does to make sure that the rug doctor's furniture attachment indeed did take care of the cat hair on Lazarus's lazy boy. And then she tells Jesus and Lazarus and the men who are with him that dinner will be in about 30 minutes. Would the men like anything before then, she says. "No, thank you, Martha," says Jesus. So Martha returns to the kitchen and says, "Okay then, Mary, they're here, and we've got 30 minutes. Time starts now. I'll start with the dessert. You..." Wait just a minute. Where's Mary? She'd been right there with her, greeting Jesus at the front door. Martha retraces her steps, and that's when she sees her. Mary is in the living room with the men, listening to Jesus. Martha cannot believe it. She cannot believe it, first of all, because, well, women don't sit with men. At least not then. They especially don't sit with them when they're talking about God and spiritual things. Besides, she can't believe it, second of all, because there are things. There are servant things. There are kitchen things. There are women things that need doing. Martha turns back into the kitchen in a huff. Who made her queen for the day, she says to herself as she walks to the stove. Drawers and cupboards now start to open and shut more rapidly and loudly than they were a little earlier. Pots and pans and their lids start to make a little more noise than is necessary too, but how else is a busy and irritated cook supposed to make sure that her irritation is noticed in the next room? Then things start going wrong. Opening the oven door to check the roast, she burns her hand on the rack. Running to the sink to get some water on it, she sees the can of mandarin oranges, which she now realizes she had forgotten to add to the Jell-O salad before it's set up. She checks her finger. She burned it good, all right. She can already start to see blisters form, and then she smells the sauce. She forgot the sauce. She runs to the stove. It's scorched. And that was the last straw. Martha storms into the living room where sits Queen Mary, hanging on to every word that Jesus says. She clears her throat. She clears it a little more loudly. She clears it a third time so they can't not notice. And then she says to Jesus, although of course she's not just talking to Jesus, she's talking to Mary, but she says to Jesus, "Lord, do you think that you could perhaps suggest to the little princess that a little help in the kitchen might not be a bad idea?" And Jesus looks at her with those eyes of his, in which there always is so much depth, including right now depth of gentleness. "Martha," he says to her, "you are so distracted by so many distracting things. Mary has chosen the good portion. She's chosen the one thing that no thing can take from her." And with those words from Jesus, this very brief episode in Luke's Gospel ends. Now, if you're familiar with that little story, you're also probably familiar with a very common interpretation of it. It's the completely black and white Mary versus Martha interpretation, which says that Mary has everything all right and Martha has it all wrong. And so the point of this story is that we should all seek to be more like Mary, which no doubt in all kinds of ways many of us probably should. But that said, I also want to say that I think a rigid black and white, don't be like Martha, be like Mary understanding of the story is at best too simplistic. And in fact, is probably just wrong. I say that for a couple of reasons. The first is that if Martha is the one behind the scenes all the time, paying nitty-gritty attention to the details behind it all, then I can think of some Marthas over the years who have been real gifts to me, to the church, to the world. Take the Martha, for example, who I knew in one little rural congregation. This Martha's name was Fred. During the winter months, Fred took personal responsibility for the condition of the furnace in the church. He checked it at least twice a week, and during particularly cold spells, he would make the 2-mile trip every single day to make sure it wouldn't stop and pipes would freeze. The furnace was his project. Fred was a Martha. A practical, sensible servant of the church, servant of the Lord, who saw to the daily operation of the church offices and church programs and church ministries by seeing to the daily operation of the church furnace. And Fred's just one. There are countless other Marthas that I've known. Marthas you've known for sure. They are the cooks and servers who provide food and refreshments for funerals and potlucks and after-church coffees. They show up on Saturday afternoons and they set up when there's no electricity in the building and so you have to worship somewhere else. They're the ones who show up on all the church work days, and they make quilts and they polish pews and they make communion bread and they wash communion ware and they take bulletins and communion to shut-ins and they take meals and diapers to moms and they assemble newsletters and they mow church lawns and they water church plants and they switch out empty toilet paper rolls in church bathrooms. They drive people to their doctor's appointments and they are happy to stop at both the pharmacy and the grocery store on the way home. These and countless more Marthas are the foot soldiers in the kingdom who are so often taken so for granted, but who nevertheless from day to day and season to season, just keep on doing the things that they know just need to be done. If the church is faithfully going to keep on doing what it does. That's the first reason. I don't think it's accurate to listen to this Mary and Martha story and interpret as though it's just saying that Mary, the contemplative one, is just got everything right, and Martha, the hard-working servant, has got everything wrong. I've known too many Marthas who have just quietly and faithfully and tirelessly been a blessing in the church and in the world and to me. But there's another and more important reason for me ever to say that too, and that other reason comes from the fact that if you look at this brief text in its context, it's very clear that Jesus isn't saying that either. Because in Luke's Gospel, if you were here last week, you know this, in Luke's Gospel, this short little story immediately follows Jesus' telling of the story of the Good Samaritan. The primary point of which is what? To be a neighbor, that parable says, is to be the one who serves. That parable is unflinchingly critical of people who are too religious, too spiritual to get off their donkeys and get their hands a little dirty and work up a sweat giving somebody a hand. That parable is explicitly critical of those religious types who are so busy being close to God that they don't get close to. They steer around. They walk on the other side of the road. They stay away from the opportunities life gives them to do something for somebody else. The parable of the Good Samaritan, which Jesus, says Luke, told on the way to Mary and Martha's house, lifts up the servant, not the saint, the practical one, not the pious one, the doer of the word, not the ponderer of the word, as the one to be emulated. Which is why, though we surely must listen to these verses and their critique of Martha, and Martha needs to listen too, we must not do it in such a way that we belittle those Good Samaritan kind of servant Marthas who have been gifts to us all and to the world. So all that said, what is Jesus saying in his, I think, gentle but firm critique of Martha? I think he's saying something like this. Martha, thank you. Martha, God bless you. But Martha, dear Martha, so help you and so help me. You do have to know when to say when. Because why? Not because Martha's doing one single thing that is wrong, but because rather all the doing that she's doing but never stopping doing is being done at a price, and the price is being paid by her soul. Martha, observes Jesus, is distracted by many things. It occurs to me that if this story happened today, Martha wouldn't be the one in the cooking in the other room away from Jesus. She'd be the one sitting there in the room right beside Jesus, but looking at her phone, which has Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, Tinder, and of course Pokemon Go, all open and active. For Martha, the text says, is distracted by many apps. Martha, the text says, is distracted by many things. And that Greek word for distracted, thoroubatse, literally means drawn away. And the one who in this case all the doing is drawing her away from is Jesus. And without Jesus, her doing is no longer serving. Without Jesus, her doing is just busyness. Surely, there's a very important message for today in this story, given the fact that one of the most common complaints you hear people make is what? I'm just too darn busy. There's not enough time for everything, which, of course, is both true and not true. It's not true because, of course, you have all the time there is. You have 24 hours a day for all the days of your life. That's enough time for life. But the complaint is true about one thing. There's not time for everything. Everything Martha is doing is good, but apparently there's such a thing as too much of a good thing, and that's not good, or good for you, or good for those you love. For if your soul dies, then the love you're loving them with isn't love anymore. If your soul dies, then the love you're loving them with is only law. And living by law without grace, finally, every time, kills. It never gives life. Living by law without grace all the time takes from life. Which means that the issue in this story is not doing good versus doing bad. It's about knowing when to say when to things. Even to say when to some good things. For the sake of your soul and your relationships. And your relationship with He who loved you all the way to Jerusalem's cross and an empty tomb, that you might know, even when there's not enough time for everything, and there never is, it's okay. For life isn't found in things, even good things, even great things. Life is found in Jesus, who lives and loves forever. One of my father-in-law's favorite writers, Gerhard Frost, writes, I remember a wee tot twirling herself around our living room rug until she fell down and gleefully said to her father and mother, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. Obviously, what this little one meant was that she was busy. But at this particular point in her life and development, she was confused on her B's and her D's. I've often thought of my tendency to say, I'm so busy today. I've wondered if perhaps I'm not a bit confused too. So much of our busyness is really a variety of dizziness. Our hasteful waste gives evidence of the fact that we have temporarily forgotten our true goal. It's not a harsh estimate to say that when we sometimes consider ourselves to be intellectually or physically busy, what we are instead is actually spiritually dizzy. Do you hear that, Martha? The Martha who is here, the Martha who is me, the Martha who is you, the Martha who was probably all of you at one time or another. You do have to know when to say when. And you have to know when to say when to what, lest all the busyness become dizziness. And we start to think that all the doing is the point, when in fact, what we're called to remember is what one was willing to do, so that we, in the midst of it all, might know and rest in the truth of how deeply we and all are loved in spite of it all. Martha, dear Martha, the doing you do is a gift. The doing you do in so many cases is love and faithfulness in action. Martha, thank you for the doing you do. But do know when to say when, and when to say when to what. For even as a gift, all the doing can be so distracting as to draw you away. And the one it can draw you away from is Jesus. Jesus, who is right here in the room, wondering when you're going to put your pots and your pans and your phones down, and your fears and your troubles and your worries too. to spend some time with him and to rest in his presence and his promises and his peace and his grace.